I remember the sound the knife made when I stabbed through. A wet sound, like cutting raw meat. And I remember the blood. God, there was so much blood. Do you know what it feels like to mutilate a man? To cut off what he values most while he lies unconscious on the floor. It feels like justice. It feels like revenge, and it feels good. Do you think I'm a monster? That what I did was wrong? Maybe you're right, but maybe you have no idea what it's like to live with a predator under the same roof, watching him tear your family apart day after day and not being able to do anything to stop him until one day you can. If you've gone through difficult times in your life or know someone who has suffered from domestic violence, this story will deeply touch your heart. Please leave your like, subscribe to the Traumatic Accounts channel, and turn on notifications to receive our next real stories. Comment where you're watching from and what time it is there so I know who's listening to me at this vulnerable moment in my life. My name is Daniel, I'm 16 years old, and I just got out of juvenile detention. I spent 2 years away from home, 2 years paying for what I did one night in March when I was 14. 2 years being labeled as the violent boy, the aggressor, the mentally disturbed. But nobody talks about why I did it. Nobody talks about what that man did to me and what he almost did to my little sister. This is my story. A story I need to tell because I can't take this weight on my chest anymore. Because there are things I've kept silent about for years. Secrets that are killing me inside and truths that the world deserves to know. I'm not looking for your forgiveness or your understanding. I'm just looking for I don't know. Maybe finding someone who understands that sometimes when the system fails, you have to take justice into your own hands. My life was normal until I was 11. I lived with my mom, Elisa, and my little sister, Sophia, who was then 7 years old. My dad had left when Sophia was a baby. Typical story of a cowardly man who doesn't want responsibilities. But the three of us were doing fine. My mom worked double shifts at the hospital as a nursing assistant, always tired, but always with a smile for us. I took care of Sophia after school, helped her with her homework, prepared snacks. I was like her older brother and her father at the same time. Everything changed when Robert appeared. My mom met him at work. He was a medical equipment technician. He was always passing through the hospital fixing machines, tall with a strong build, with that salesman's smile that convinces anyone. At first, he seemed perfect. He brought flowers for Mom, brought me video games, bought dolls for Sophia, the typical man who comes to complete the broken family. I remember the first time he slept over. I was 11 and it seemed strange to me to hear noises from my mother's room during the night, but I thought that's what adult love was like. Nobody prepares you to understand when something isn't right. Robert moved into our house 3 months after meeting my mom. He brought his things, his smells, his habits. The house was no longer the same, no longer our refuge. He had his schedules, his rules, his spaces we couldn't touch. My mom started to change too. She smiled less, spoke in a lower voice, like walking on eggshells so as not to disturb him. The first few months were strange. Robert was polite to me and Sophia, but there was something in his gaze that bothered me. The way he observed us when Mom wasn't around, as if evaluating us, like a predator studying his prey. I was in 8th grade when it all started. A Tuesday afternoon, Mom had the night shift and wouldn't return until the next morning. Sophia was at her friend Camilla's house for a science project. It was just Robert and me. I was in my room doing math homework when he entered without knocking. "Daniel, come here. I need you to help me with something." His voice sounded different, deeper, more intimate. He took me to the living room and asked me to sit next to him on the couch. He put his hand on my leg. "You're a good boy, Daniel. Very handsome. Your mom must be proud of you." His hand slowly moved up my thigh. I was paralyzed. I didn't understand what was happening, but I knew it was wrong. "This will be our secret." Okay. Men have secrets that women don't understand. I felt nauseous. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out of my throat. That was the first time, but not the last. During the following months, the secrets became routine. Every time Mom left, every time Sophia wasn't around, every time he decided it was time, things happened. He told me that if I told anyone, he'd hurt Sophia. "Your sister is very small and innocent," he'd say. "It would be a shame if something happened to her." I was 12, and I couldn't sleep at night anymore. I developed terrible nightmares. I stopped eating. My grades dropped significantly. The teachers asked me what was happening. But how do you explain to an adult that your stepfather is doing things to you that he shouldn't, and you can't do anything to stop him? I tried to tell my mom. Once I gathered all my courage and said that Robert made me feel uncomfortable. She got angry with me. Daniel, Robert is the best thing that's happened to us. He's trying to be a good father to you. Don't be ungrateful. That was the last time I tried to ask for help. The problems continued for another 2 years. Robert became more aggressive, more demanding. Things escalated in ways that I can't describe without completely breaking down. My body was his property. My silence was his power. I started cutting myself to feel something different from the constant feeling of disgust. I started getting into fights at school to get suspended and have excuses not to be at home. I started wishing I was dead, but what terrified me most wasn't what he did to me. It was the way he had started looking at Sophia. She was already 10 years old and had started to develop. I saw how Robert's eyes followed her around the house. I saw how he found excuses to enter the bathroom when she was taking a shower. I saw how he bought smaller, tighter clothes for her. And I knew, with that terrible certainty that breaks the soul, that I had only been the first course. The main dish would be my sister. If you're identifying with this story or know someone who may be going through something similar, leave your like and subscribe to the channel. Your interaction gives me strength to continue telling this difficult story. Comment where you're watching from and what time it is there so that I know I'm not alone in this journey. The night everything changed, I came home early after soccer practice. They had canceled practice because it was raining. It was 6:30 p.m. Mom wouldn't arrive until 10 p.m. I thought Robert would be watching TV as always, but when I opened the front door, I heard Sophia crying and knew that he had already started with her. My sister's crying came from the living room, a muffled, desperate cry that I would recognize anywhere because it was the same as mine when I was 12 years old. I froze at the entrance with my school backpack still on my shoulders, feeling like my blood was freezing in my veins. It couldn't be. Not with Sophia. Not with my baby. I walked silently to the living room, with my heart beating so hard that I thought it was going to jump out of my chest. What I saw completely destroyed me. Robert had Sophia sitting on his lap. She was in her underwear, crying silently while he touched her in an inappropriate way and whispered in her ear, "Calm down, princess. It's normal. It's what fathers do when they love their daughters." Sophia saw me from where she was, and her eyes begged me for help. Those brown eyes that had always looked at me with adoration, that had always trusted that their older brother would protect her from everything. And I had failed. I had failed in the worst possible way. Robert still hadn't realized that I was there. He was too focused on his perversion, too drunk to notice my presence. There was a whiskey bottle on the coffee table almost empty. The bastard was drunk doing that to my little sister in our home while our mother worked to maintain this hellish family. I saw red, literally saw red. I didn't think, I didn't plan, I didn't assess the consequences. I just acted with 3 years of accumulated anger, 3 years of helplessness, 3 years of silence, that finally found their voice in a war cry that came from the deepest part of my soul. I grabbed the whiskey bottle that was on the table. It was full of golden liquid, heavy, solid, perfect for what I had in mind. "Let her go, you bastard!" Robert raised his head surprised. His eyes met mine for a fraction of a second. I saw fear there. Real fear. For the first time in 3 years, I had the power. I hit him with the bottle on his head with all the strength that my 14 years of hatred could gather. The sound was horrible, like a watermelon bursting against concrete. The bottle didn't completely break, but the impact was enough to send him straight to the floor. He collapsed like a sack of potatoes, unconscious with his pants still down from his disgusting game with Sophia. Sophia ran to me crying, trembling, seeking refuge in my arms. I hugged her tight. I felt how her little body shook against mine. "It's over, baby. It's over. He won't hurt you anymore, I promise." No. But when I looked down and saw Robert lying there, with blood starting to flow from his head, with his pants at his ankles, with that disgusting thing he had used to hurt me for years exposed and vulnerable, Something broke inside of me. The fury that I had contained for so long exploded like a nuclear bomb. I left Sophia on the couch. "Stay here and don't look." I went to the kitchen and grabbed the biggest butcher knife I could find. Sophia screamed for me not to do it, but I wasn't listening to her anymore. I only heard the buzzing of revenge in my ears. I returned to the living room where Robert was still unconscious. I looked at him lying there, bleeding, vulnerable, pathetic. All those years of power over me, of terror, of humiliation, reduced to this: a drunk and bleeding man on the floor of his own home. "This is for every night that I couldn't sleep," I whispered, though he couldn't hear me. "This is for every time you touched me. This is for every threat. And this?" I raised the knife. "This is for touching my sister." I cut him. I cut him like he had cut my childhood. I cut him like he had cut my innocence. I cut him like he had tried to cut Sophia's future. There was so much blood, more than I imagined. It spread across the living room floor like a red river, staining the rug that Mom had bought the previous year. But I didn't care. I felt free for the first time in years. I felt free. Sophia screamed behind me. Not screams of fear, but screams of horror for what her brother had just done. Screams that brought me back to reality, that made me drop the knife and realize the enormity of what I had done. "Daniel, what did you do? What did you do?" Sophia was hysterical, pointing at the bloody scene in front of us. I called 911. With my hands still stained with blood, I dialed the numbers that I knew would change our lives forever. "I need an ambulance and the police. I think I killed someone." The operator asked me questions that I answered like a robot. "Address? What happened? Was anyone else injured? Was the aggressor still a threat?" How ironic that she'd ask me about the aggressor when I had just become one. The paramedics arrived first. They came in running, saw the scene. They immediately separated Sophia from me. "The kid has a weapon," shouted one of them. Although I had dropped the knife long ago, but I suppose when you're a teenager covered in blood next to a mutilated man, you're automatically considered dangerous. They put Robert on a stretcher. He was still alive, although he had lost a lot of blood. The paramedics worked frantically to stabilize him, while one of them yelled at me, "What did you do to him? Why did you do this?" I wanted to explain. I wanted to tell about the 3 years of abuse, about the sleepless nights, about the threats, about what he was doing to Sophia. But the words wouldn't come out. I could only stand there trembling, seeing how they took away the man who had destroyed my childhood. The police arrived 5 minutes later. They handcuffed me immediately, read me my rights, put me in the back of a patrol car. Through the window, I saw them taking Robert into the ambulance. I saw Sophia talking with a social worker. I saw neighbors looking out their windows, probably wondering how the quiet boy from the Blue House had ended up becoming headline news. At the police station, they interrogated me for hours, detective after detective, all asking the same questions. Why did you attack him? Had you planned to hurt him? Do you understand the gravity of what you did? I didn't tell them about the abuse. No, not immediately. I was too ashamed, too confused, too traumatized. I just kept repeating. He was hurting my sister. I had to protect her. My mom arrived at the police station at midnight. The officers had called her, had explained the basics. Your son attacked your husband. There are serious injuries. You need to come immediately. I saw when she entered the interrogation room. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her nurse uniform wrinkled, her face a mixture of confusion, terror, and disappointment. "Daniel, how could you do this? Robert loves you. He loves all of us. How could you hurt him like this?" Those words hurt me more than anything that Robert had ever done to me. My own mother defending my abuser without even asking me why I had done it. That's when my silence finally broke. Through tears, I told everything. Every disgusting detail, every night of terror, every threat. I saw how her face went from disbelief to horror, from denial to acceptance. No, it can't be true. Robert would never... He would never do that. But her protest grew weaker as I gave more details. Details that only someone who had lived that nightmare could know. The following days were a whirlwind of doctors, psychologists, social workers, lawyers. Everyone wanted to examine me, evaluate me, understand how a normal boy had been capable of such an act of violence. The medical examination confirmed years of abuse, the marks, the scars, the physical evidence that my body had kept as a silent witness. Sophia was also examined. The results confirmed that the abuse had started recently with her. Robert survived, but his genitals were completely destroyed. The doctors did what they could, but the damage was too extensive. He would have to live the rest of his life remembering what he had done and what had been done to him for doing it. My case made the news. 14-year-old boy mutilates his stepfather in act of revenge. Journalists camped outside our house. My school photo appeared on all the news channels. I became the symbol of juvenile vigilante justice, the example of what happens when the system fails to protect children. Some called me a hero, others called me a monster. I just felt like a broken boy who had made an irreversible decision in a moment of absolute desperation. The trial began 6 months after the incident. By that time, the media had already built their narrative. The abused boy who took revenge on his abuser was a perfect story for the headlines with a clear victim, obvious villain, and poetic justice. But reality, as always, was much more complicated than it appeared. My lawyer was an older guy named Peterson, who specialized in juvenile cases. He was good at his job, but he had that condescending way of talking to me, as if I were a traumatized child who needed protection, instead of someone who had made a conscious and calculated decision. "Daniel, we're going to claim self-defense in defense of others," he explained to me during one of our sessions. "It's the most solid strategy. You found your sister being abused. You acted instinctively to protect her. The jury will sympathize with that." I nodded, but inside I knew that Peterson had no idea of the complete truth. No one did, because what had happened that night hadn't been instinct. It had been the result of months of meticulous planning. You see, I didn't arrive home early by chance that night. It wasn't because they canceled soccer practice because of the rain. That was the lie I told to everyone, including my lawyer. The truth is that I had been watching Robert for weeks, studying his patterns, waiting for the perfect moment. I knew he had started stalking Sophia. I had seen him enter her room at night when he thought I was sleeping. I had seen him handle her underwear when he washed it. I had intercepted text messages where he said she was his special princess and that soon he would teach her grown-up games. I couldn't allow Sophia to go through the same as me, but I also knew that if I told anyone, nobody would believe me. I had already tried with Mom before, and it had been useless. Adults don't listen to children when they speak ill of other adults, especially adults who financially support the family. So I decided I had to take action myself. I spent weeks preparing. I studied videos on the internet about vulnerable points of the human body. I researched self-defense cases, reading about which factors judges considered when determining culpability. I even practiced with homemade dummies, calculating the force needed to incapacitate an adult man. I knew Robert got drunk on Tuesdays when Mom worked the night shift. It was his routine. He'd arrive from work, drink half a liter of whiskey while watching television, and then he'd look for fun. For years, that fun had been me, but lately he had been looking more towards Sophia's room. On the Tuesday that it all happened, I skipped practice on purpose. I told the coach I felt sick, that I had a stomach ache. I arrived home exactly at 6:30 p.m., knowing that Robert would already be drunk, knowing that Sophia would be alone with him. I entered through the back door to not make noise. I heard Robert's voice in the living room, that sickening, sticky voice he used when he wanted to play. I heard Sophia weakly protesting, saying she didn't want to, that she felt uncomfortable. I waited another 5 minutes. I wanted Robert to be completely focused on what he was doing, completely vulnerable. I wanted to surprise him in the act so he couldn't deny it later, so he couldn't make up excuses or blame me. When I finally entered the living room and saw them together, I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and horror. Satisfaction because my plan was working exactly as I had imagined. Horror because seeing my sister in that situation, although I had been expecting it to happen, continued to be devastating. But I didn't let emotions control me. I remained cold, calculating. I shouted for Robert to raise his head and see me, for him to know who was going to punish him. I wanted him, in his last moments of consciousness, to see my face and understand that he had underestimated the boy he had been abusing for years. The whiskey bottle wasn't there by chance. I had placed it in that specific position before going to school that morning, calculating the perfect angle to be able to grab it quickly. I had practiced the movement dozens of times in my room using an empty bottle and a pillow. When I hit him, I felt a deep satisfaction seeing him fall. It wasn't blind rage that moved me. It was calculated justice. It was the end of a story that I had been writing for months, and when I picked up the knife, well, that part was personal. That part was pure revenge. But even in the midst of fury, I knew exactly what I was doing. I knew that that specific cut would permanently incapacitate him without killing him. I knew that he would have to live the rest of his life, remembering what he had done and remembering that a 14-year-old boy had been smarter than him. Sophia screamed when she saw what I did, but her screams were of shock, not fear, because deep down she knew that what I had done was justified. She knew that her older brother had done what needed to be done to protect her. During the trial, I never admitted that I had planned everything. I kept the story that it had been a spontaneous act of brotherly protection. My lawyer built his case around this narrative, and it worked. The jury saw a traumatized boy who had reacted instinctively to save his little sister. But there was someone else in that courtroom who knew the truth. Someone who had observed me as carefully as I had observed him. Robert was there in a wheelchair with a colostomy bag and without the possibility of ever using his genitals again. When our eyes met during my testimony, I saw something in his gaze that made me know that he had understood, that he had discovered that everything had been a perfect plan. And instead of fear or regret, what I saw in his eyes was respect. The respect of a predator for another predator who had turned out to be smarter. That look confirmed something that I had been suspecting since that night. That maybe I wasn't so different from Robert as I liked to think. That maybe I had that same coldness, that same ability to manipulate situations to get what I wanted. The difference was that I had used those skills to protect my family, or at least that's what I told myself to sleep at night. The 2 years in juvie were strange. On one hand, I was treated like a kind of hero by the other inmates. The story of how I had mutilated my abuser spread quickly, and that gave me a certain status. No one messed with me. Even the toughest guys respected me. But on the other hand, the psychologists of the institution wouldn't stop evaluating me, trying to understand if I was a danger to society or simply a traumatized boy who had acted under extreme circumstances. They never came to a definitive conclusion. Dr. Martin, my main psychologist, always said to me, "Daniel, I understand why you did what you did, but what worries me is the meticulous way in which you describe the events. It's as if you had prepared for this." I always denied it, of course. I said it was only because I had relived that night so many times in my mind that all the details had become super clear. But inside I knew that she was right. There was something in me, something cold and calculating, that had orchestrated the whole situation. In juvie, I also learned things about myself, even if I didn't know it. I discovered that I had a facility for manipulating people, for making them believe what I wanted them to believe. The therapists, the guards, the other inmates, they all saw in me what I decided they would see. For some, I showed the traumatized boy who needed protection. For others, I showed the calculating avenger who had done justice. For others, I showed the protective brother who had risked everything for his family. And they all believed completely. It was during my second year there that I met Marcus, a 17-year-old guy who had killed his mother's boyfriend because he beat her. His story was similar to mine, but he had been less elegant in his approach. He had used a gun, he had killed, he had left evidence everywhere. "You're smart, Daniel," he told me one afternoon while we played cards in the common room. "I killed mine, but you destroyed yours. It's different, it's better. Yours will remember what you did every day for the rest of his life." Marcus understood what the psychologist didn't want to understand, that what I had done hadn't just been revenge, it had been a work of art. A perfect lesson about the consequences of hurting someone smarter than you. During those 2 years, Mom visited me every 2 weeks. Sophia came sometimes, but it was difficult for her. Every time she saw me, she remembered that night. She remembered the violence she had witnessed. I understood why she preferred to keep her distance. Mom had divorced Robert, of course. She didn't have a choice after all the truth came out in the trial. She had lost the house, had to move in with her sister. She had started family therapy with Sophia. Her life had completely fallen apart, but curiously, she never blamed me for it. "You did what you had to do, honey," she would tell me during visits. "You were braver than I was. Forgive me for not protecting you before." But I saw something else in her eyes. I saw the same discomfort that I had seen in Robert that night, as if she had understood that her son was not exactly the innocent victim that everyone believed him to be. My release day came a week after I turned 16. I had been a model inmate. I had completed all my rehabilitation programs. I had shown appropriate remorse and significant progress according to my evaluations. What they didn't know was that it had all been an act. I didn't regret what I had done. I didn't feel traumatized by the violence I had inflicted. If anything, I felt proud. I had identified a problem in my family. I had created a plan to solve it, and I had executed that plan perfectly. The only aspect I regretted was not having been able to do it earlier, not having been smart enough or brave enough at 11 years old to stop it sooner, so that my childhood could have been different, maybe it would have been normal. But I suppose that the experiences we live turn us into who we are. And what Robert did to me, what I did to him, that transformed me into someone who understood real power, the power of intelligence applied with precision, the power of patience combined with determination, the power to do justice when the system fails. Now that I'm free, people look at me differently. Some with pity, others with fear, others with respect, but nobody looks at me like a normal kid. That's fine, because it's been a long time since I stopped being a normal kid. The question I ask myself now is, what do I do with what I've learned? How do I use these skills that I discovered in myself? Because out there are many other Roberts, many other predators who take advantage of defenseless children. And maybe, just maybe, I can do something about it. After all, I've already demonstrated that I'm very good at this justice thing. And unlike the legal system, I don't need proof beyond reasonable doubt. I just need to be sure that someone deserves what I'm going to do. Does that make me a vigilante, a sociopath, a hero? Honestly, I no longer care about labels. The only thing that matters to me is that never again will I feel helpless in front of someone who abuses the power they have over others. And if that means I have to cross lines that society says I shouldn't cross, well, I've already crossed them once before, and the world didn't end. In fact, the world became a slightly safer place, at least for Sophia. And in the end, that's all that really matters. Robert is still alive, by the way. He lives in a social assistance apartment with caregivers who help him with his basic needs. He can't work, obviously. His social life is non-existent. He spends most of his time watching TV, remembering what it was like to be a complete man. Sometimes I wonder if he thinks of me, if he remembers the face of that 14-year-old boy who changed his life forever with a kitchen knife. If he realizes that he completely underestimated his victim, probably yes. Probably every time he tries to urinate and has to use that disgusting bag, he remembers me. Every time he tries to feel like a man and can't, he remembers what I did, and that makes me smile. I know it sounds cruel. I know it sounds like something a psychopath would say, but I don't care. There's a difference between gratuitous cruelty and deserved justice. What I did to Robert was the latter. During these 2 years, I've had a lot of time to think about everything that happened, to analyze my motivations, to understand my actions, to decide if I would do the same again in similar circumstances. And the answer is, yes, without hesitation, I would do it again. But I've also come to understand something else about myself. Something that perhaps the psychologists at juvie suspected, but could never prove. I am not a victim who reacted. I am a predator who found another predator and eliminated him from the equation. The difference is that my hunting instinct is directed at people who hurt others, not at innocents. That makes me better than Robert. It perhaps makes me equally dangerous. Probably more so because Robert attacked out of weakness, out of pathological need, without a real plan. I attack by choice, with clear purpose, with surgical precision, and that makes me something much more lethal. Now that I'm back in the world, I have to decide what to do with this understanding of myself. I can pretend I'm normal, get a normal job, live a normal life, pretend that none of this happened. Or I can accept what I am and find a way to use my talents to make the world a better place, or at least a more dangerous place for people who hurt children. I'm not saying I'm going to go out looking for abusers to mutilate. I'm not stupid. I've already had my opportunity to do justice with my own hands, and I'm not going to waste it by getting into unnecessary trouble. But if someday I find myself in a situation where someone is hurting a child, where the system is failing to protect an innocent, where the only way to stop the abuse is to take direct action, well, I've already demonstrated that I'm willing and capable of doing whatever necessary. And I won't apologize for it. I won't regret having protected my sister. I won't feel guilty for having punished my abuser in a way that ensured he could never hurt another child. If that makes me a monster in the eyes of society, so be it. I'd rather be a monster who protects innocence than a normal citizen who stays silent while children suffer. In the end, what I did worked. Robert will never abuse another child. Sophia is safe. Mom finally understood the truth and got rid of a man who would have destroyed her eventually. Our family, though broken, is better without him. And I learned something valuable about myself. I learned that when necessary, I can be exactly as ruthless as the situation requires. I learned that intelligence and patience can be more powerful weapons than brute force. I learned that sometimes to protect the people you love, you have to be willing to transform yourself into something that society considers monstrous. Do I regret having lost 2 years of my adolescence in juvie? Not at all. Those 2 years gave me time to process what I had experienced, to understand what I had done, and to plan what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And most importantly, they gave me time to make sure that next time I have to act, I'll be even smarter, even more careful, even more efficient, because there will be a next time, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next year, but at some point I'll come across another Robert, and when that happens, I'll be ready. I just hope that when that moment comes, you'll have the intelligence not to stand on the wrong side, because as I've already demonstrated once, I'm not the defenseless boy that people believe I am. I'm something much more dangerous. I'm someone who knows exactly what they're capable of doing when someone they love is in danger, and I have no problem doing it again. Before finishing, I want to ask once more that if this story impacted you, please like the video. It's not just for the algorithm or the numbers. It's because I need to know that there are people out there who understand that sometimes real justice doesn't come from the courts or the police. Sometimes it comes from ordinary people who refuse to stay silent in the face of abuse. If you haven't done it yet, subscribe to the Traumatic Accounts channel by pressing the subscribe button and turn on notifications. Here we publish real stories every day. Stories of young people who have lived through extreme situations and had to make difficult decisions. Where we don't judge, where we understand that the world isn't black and white, where we know that sometimes doing the right thing requires breaking the rules. Comment where you're watching from and what time it is there. You don't need to give details, you don't need to expose anyone. Just let us know that you're not alone. And if you have a story that you think we should tell, send it to us. Maybe your experience can help someone who is going through the same thing. Forgive me if this video was too long, but these experiences cannot be told halfway. You can't understand the magnitude of what happened without knowing all the details, without understanding the complete context. I needed to vent to someone who could understand me, to people who wouldn't judge me just for doing what I had to do. Thank you for accompanying me to the end. Thank you for listening to my story without prejudice. Thank you for being part of this community where we support each other, regardless of the decisions we had to make to survive. And remember, if someday you find yourself in a situation where you have to choose between being a victim or being the one who takes control of the situation, I hope you have the courage to do what I did. I hope you protect whoever you need to protect, no matter what others think of you afterwards, because in the end, the only thing that matters is being able to look at yourself in the mirror and know that you did everything in your power to prevent the suffering of someone innocent. And if that makes you a monster, well, sometimes the world needs monsters who are on the right side.